are back on another episode of Popcorn Politics, talking about Star Trek Discovery Season 3, Episode 4. Daniel Lewis Crumpton joins me again to talk about this. Daniel, what?
Oh, man, you didn't say live from the car this time. I wanted you to say live from the car. We messed up the first time, and you said live from the car, and I was like, that is so neat because I'm in the car, and the website's in the car. And it's like I'm actually in the car. And so all of a sudden I was like, it's kind of cool. It's really authentic because Dylan said, Daniel Lewis Crumpton, live from the car, which is so cool. And he didn't this time. And I'm so disappointed. And now I'm basically just speaking my thoughts. And
Daniel Lewis Crumpton, live from the car.
Hey, Dylan, I'm so glad that you said I was live from the car because it's in the car. Never mind.
Daniel, how's your car?
Oh, my new car, Serena, is the carrier of Zen across the Uberverse. She is the mighty chariot of peace and relaxation. Not too much relaxation, because I'm going to go through Atlanta, and you can't be relaxed when you go through Atlanta, because you'll be dead. But yeah, she's great. Other than that, you?
I'm good in my nice quiet house.
Understood. Yeah, the cool thing I like about being mobile whenever we're doing these, is I used to get bothered when I would listen to radio shows like Coast to Coast when I was coming up, and there was somebody on a cell phone while the other person was crisp and clear. But, now that I think about it, it kind of adds some realism to it because I'm actually in a car. So I sound kind of distant. I don't know. It's not going to be the best radio or podcast or whatever, but it's real. It's what we came with.
Hey, I mean, I don't mind being on with a cell phone if that's the only mode of communication people have, and right now it's all you got. And we need to talk Star Trek because this might be my favorite episode of the entire series.
Episode 4, correct?
Yes, episode 4.
All right, how come?
The visual storytelling was breathtaking.
Exactly.
Not just that though. The storyline with Adriel, I'm forgetting her name. Adriel. Adira. I told myself, Dylan, remember that name, and I forgot it.
Yeah.
I loved the characterization of the crew. They really have fleshed this out from a 4-person cast to an ensemble.
Yeah.
In seasons 1 and 2, it really was focused on Burnham, Saru, Tilly, and Paul Stamets.
Yeah.
But now we've got Detmer and a couple others. It's great. I like how they're fleshing this out.
Yeah, man. And see, this is what they're doing is another Deep Space Nine, because when Deep Space Nine came out, a lot of Star Trek people kind of took put their nose up to it because it was something different. It was a space station that really didn't go anywhere, so you had reoccurring.
I lost you. Hello? Mr. Crumpton? Where have you gone, Mr. Crumpton? Where have you gone, Mr. Crumpton? Please come back. I miss you terribly. Mr. Crumpton? Hello? Did the Uberverse absorb you? Where are you? Daniel.
All right. I'm back, Dylan. Sorry, there was a deer smoking a cigar on the side of the road with a pack of Pabst Blue Ribbon, so I didn't want to die.
That's very inconsiderate of the deer.
It really is. I mean, these Georgia deer, dude, gee. They're kamikaze deer, dude. Kamikaze deer. Anyway, so ensemble cast. Yeah, I mean, like I was saying, with Deep Space Nine, the Star Trek fans were apprehensive to it at first because it was something different. You know, they weren't going anywhere. They had reoccurring characters. It took seasons to build this big story arc, and then come to find out, by the time they got done, Deep Space Nine is a masterpiece. And so when Discovery started, and all these fans were doing the same thing, I'm like, guys, they're doing something different. And what they're doing different with this is, I mean, not just the messing about with time and the spore drive, but they're taking the focus away from the key bridge crew, like the captain, the doctor, and the science officer. You know, all the Star Trek shows have a lot of characters, and they do shine lights on all the characters, but most of the shows focus on 2 or 3 characters. But, you know, like I was telling you when we were talking before we were recording and everything, I was reconsidering the concept of Saru being the captain, because I don't think that he belongs in the captain's chair, but having him in the captain's chair allows the audience to focus on what they're doing, which is they're really making this a character-driven story, multi-character story. And in this one, it kind of cements that, oh, okay. I mean, I knew it anyway, but in this one, it really sinks in that's what they're doing here. And we just got to be, you know, Star Trek fans who were patient, which I didn't have a problem with this anyway. Now it's starting to pay off. And, you know, I was scrolling through my news feed earlier, and I saw an article that said, now Discovery is Star Trek. So I'm like, you Johnny-come-latelys. You know, if they throw a few Deep Space Nine references and Voyager references, now you're on board. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, I don't understand people. Look, I'm not a diehard Star Trek fan. This is the first Star Trek show I've ever watched, but this is fresh science fiction telling an interesting story about people trying to make their way through a tumultuous galaxy. Is that not Star Trek?
That's Star Trek to me. But yeah, and another thing that I like that, and the Star Trek's always touched on issues of the day in their own way, and I want to get into it a little bit more. But I really, as it's a personal thing, but I really like that across the board, what Star Trek is really addressing, like especially with Picard, but this episode with the Trill, Adira, they also address it. If you kind of know what you're looking at, is the idea of trauma and post-traumatic stress disorder. You know, Picard was all about that. It was all about him dealing with that, and how even 20 years later, an event that happened can still haunt you. And in this one with Adira, which we'll get to, it also touches on it, and even like a method to a technique to kind of deal with it. But so I like, you know, I think Discovery is just carrying on the tradition, and those guys who were, you know, wagging their finger at it, now they're going to get on board because now it's obvious what the show's doing.
I mean, yeah, the show, especially this season, is very obviously trying to deal with trauma and how people respond to it. You have a perfect juxtaposition between how Burnham is dealing with it and Adira. Burnham used her trauma to grow, and it's made her feel alienated, and she doesn't know her place anymore, as it was so eloquently put by the other doctor. What's his name again?
I was going to ask you. I can't remember his name either, but I like that guy.
So do I. Hold on. I'm looking him up.
Yeah, and that was. I had to actually stop this episode a few times and kind of rewind it because I did pick up that it was dealing with trauma. But that doctor
Hugh.
Talking about Hugh.
Hugh.
Yeah, when Hugh's talking to Michael in her quarters, he coins this phrase. Well, I don't know if he coined it, but he said there's a theory called post-traumatic growth. And I paused it and I said, oh my God, you know. And when he explained it, he says that trauma can cause rapid expansion, basically, in evolution, personal growth. And I said, wow. And for somebody who deals with PTSD every day, when I heard that, I was like, I've never thought of it that way. I have never thought of it that way. However, they got a point, you know? And like, I've really been chewing on that. And that came from a Star Trek episode, you know? And it's affected me on a personal level. So it's like, this is Star Trek. But anyway, but yeah, the idea of trauma and how we deal with it, and that, you know, you could possibly take trauma and use it as a catapult rather than cinder blocks weighing you down at the bottom of the ocean. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I mean, it was a great juxtaposition too. Burnham using her trauma as a means for growth, not to say that that's the only valid response, but pair that with Adira, who's basically just closed off a part of herself, a literal part of herself.
Anyway, so yeah, the show is addressing a lot of trauma and how to deal with it, and we made the comparison with Burnham using it for post-traumatic growth, and Adira does kind of the opposite, you know.
Yes.
Rather than using her trauma and facing it and using it as an energy source, she blocks it out. She blocks out the memory to the point where, you know, the symbiont inside of her, she can't connect with the different personalities that it's carrying. You know what I mean? And I think that's kind of the main avenue that a lot of people who suffer from PTSD kind of go down by instinct, by reflex, because they don't know any other way.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. Yeah.
I mean, you know, not to get too metaphysical, but in the other circles that I run with, the Trill are interesting, and I'm glad to see them come back. They first appeared like in Deep Space Nine, and you know, you did get to see the actual symbiote and them taking it from one host to the other, and you did get to see the caves. But you know, like I said, back then Star Trek didn't have the budget that it does now, so some things you know with visual storytelling they just couldn't do back then. And one of the things I'd always imagined in my head when I was watching Deep Space Nine is what it does look like whenever a host meets, you know, goes into the symbiont to have communion or whatever they called it. I forget what they called it. But whenever they get to meet all their former hosts, like I was always like, I wonder what that would look like. Do what now?
The Circle, I think they called it.
Right, Circle. So I was always like, I wonder what that would look like. Well, now, thankfully, that Star Trek has a budget, and you were talking about earlier the visual storytelling. Whenever Adira and Michael do end up, you know, going into the reunion or the communion or whatever, the visual effects, man. And I wasn't even on any hallucinogenics or anything, but I was like, oh my God, the way that they visually showed a person finally facing their inner personalities or their inner traumas was brilliant, in my opinion. I mean, and it didn't take away from the story whatsoever. It only enhanced it.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. The visual design was incredible.
Right.
Just the little tentacles coming down at Adira. So cool.
Yeah, the way it looked, and I'm glad that they didn't like try to make that the point of the episode was for her to figure it out. That it was a very quick, hey, you are actually, and if we take this to a human place, hey, you're actually in the halls of your own memory palace. All of this that's around you is actually you, and these strands are trying to connect with you, and you keep running from them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you have to let them. You have to face your trauma.
Yeah, I mean, you have to. Yeah, you got to face it. You got to let it. You got to let it play out throughout your body. And the way they did it with hers, and hers was absolutely heartbreaking too. You know what I mean?
Like, yeah.
The personal story there was real heartbreaking. I forget the boy's name, but the whole concept was. Go ahead.
Why do I feel like it was Kai?
I think it was something like that, actually. Something like that. But yeah, I mean, I guess it didn't really, unless I missed it, I suppose that admiral that had sent the message from Starfleet Clearly, he was a Trill, and they were sending a generation ship, which I would assume means, it's going to take quite a while to get to Federation space, or known Federation space. And the best way to preserve the symbiote and the knowledge would be in a Trill. And that would go from one host to the boy. And then, of course, there was the explosion in Adira, which I don't know if I've ever heard of a human being a host to a symbiote either. So at first I was a little like, okay, well, is the reason that Adira can't access these memories because she's a human, or is it because she's blocking out her trauma? Or is it both? Who knows?
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm not well versed in the Star Trek lore, so I kind of took them at their word that that never happened. Um, but I thought it was really interesting that she was the first human.
Yeah, yeah. I don't, to my recollection, I don't recall any Deep Space Nine episode where any other race other than the Trill could do it, and a very few percentage of them can do it, can be a host. But it's interesting. Have you ever heard of the concept of a walk-in?
Uh, I'm not sure what context we could mean, but I know of walk-ins. They're like walk-in appointments.
No, 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 no. In more of the esoteric circles, you have this idea of what's called a walk-in, which essentially it's like this. Okay, I was born in 1980, and at 6 years old, I tripped in the middle of the road, and a car almost crushed my head. Right. So I had a near-death experience. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, or say when I was 15 years old, I drowned. My body drowned. In esoteric circles, there's this concept where two souls make a contract. One is the original soul of the body, and the second soul agrees to come in at any given point in that person's time and take over the body while assimilating their memories, right? It's an idea called a walk-in. So sometimes when a person has a near-death experience, the person that originally was born in that body actually did leave the body, and another spirit comes in. Have you ever heard of this before?
I've never heard of it before now.
Okay, not many people have because it's kind of out there, but I think there's some validity to it. If you tie it to psychology, that a person after a traumatic event literally becomes a different person, right? So it doesn't matter if you take it on a metaphysical term or metaphysical terms or psychological terms. There is a complete change of the ego, of the personality. A person might change their name. A person might go through extreme taste differences, religious differences, spiritual differences. But anyway, it's the idea of a walk-in. And in that concept, there is a period after the event, after the death event, or the download event, when the original soul leaves and the new soul comes in, where the new soul, because it's in the body of the other person, it has trouble assimilating the memories that are in the hardware of the brain. So there's a period of confusion where it doesn't know where it ends and the previous spirit begins, right?
Right,
Until
okay.
finally, until finally the spirit kind of levels out and goes, okay, that happened to that person, though I have those memories and experiences, I am not that person anymore. Who am I now as an individual? Anyway, it's a thing in esoteric circles. And I think when Star Trek with the Trill, it's like that's the best way that you can explain it, is that there is a host and then there's a symbiont. And the symbiont can jump from host to host and carries the knowledge and experience with it. So I find that very interesting that the Trill is actually talking, with Star Trek. Star Trek's really talking about some deep esoteric stuff with the Trill, and a lot of people just don't know it. So it's Star Trek, though.
Yeah. No, I mean, that actually does sound like a really good way to describe the Trill, though.
Yeah. Yep. I think so. But yeah, and I think they told it perfect in this story, and I think this was a good episode that carried the story further. Like, we're done with the premiere, we're done with the reunion episode, we built the world, and this one really kind of was like, all right, this is where we're going. Now we're in high gear.
Can I just say, on a completely different note, I also very much appreciated the storyline with the crew in this episode where they were where it was very obvious how high the tensions were running between them and Saru kind of trying to bring it all back together.
Oh yeah, dude. Yeah, I like what they did with the episode too because that's what a family looks like. You know what I mean? You're not always going to be cheerio. I mean, you're going to be at each other's throats sometimes. You know,
Yeah.
but I like how at the end all of the ones who had cooler heads came back and kind of made amends. You know what I mean? I didn't feel that it was necessary to show all the people that were at the table to do that because the scene with the Buster Keaton movie kind of summed it up. It was like, yeah, you're gonna go through shit together. It's gonna suck. You're gonna be at each other's throats from time to time, but go cool down, come back to the table, and realize who your family is.
Yeah, but I mean, I think we needed that scene at the table. I think that was absolutely necessary. Maybe not all the characters, but it needed to be there. We needed the explosion of those tensions so that the Buster Keaton moment felt earned.
Right, right. The other thing I think was cool about this is Zora's awakening. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that actually creeped me out a little bit.
Well, you did. See, I knew this was coming, and I used to have a minivan, and I named her Zora because of this crap, because I'm that much of a geek. But yeah, there was a short trek in between season 1 and 2 where Discovery's like parked in the nebula. There's no crew, and this alien guy ends up on the Discovery, and the computer has become self-aware, and she names herself Zora. And according to that short trek, the ship had been there without a crew for 1,000 years. So this was alluding to this season. So that's how far in advance the writers are going. And in this episode, whenever Saru's talking to the computer and she kind of blips on for the first time, and he realizes, he goes, wait a minute, a computer would not be able to ascertain the situation in such a human way. And, he lets the doctor in on, at the end, he lets the doctor in on, hey, no, what I was saying was the idea of like when Zora blips on and Saru, when he's interacting with the computer, it quickly dawns on him that a computer would not be able to respond to his questions in such a human way. And he quickly realizes that they're dealing with something artificial. It's an artificial intelligence that just became self-aware. And so at the end, I like that he shared it with the doctor that, hey, this billion-year-old sphere that we have in the cargo bay that has all this knowledge might have merged itself with our ship. And our ship might be alive. You know what I mean? Which is kind of cool. I know what that's like. Sometimes I've felt like automobiles I've owned are alive. I think that they might be, they, for sure. So I like the idea of that. The ship is alive. And now, I don't know. I know that in, what was it? It was Solo. I think that they intimated the same thing. And I like that too. I like the idea that the Millennium Falcon, I like the idea that spaceships can actually be sentient or vessels can be sentient. I don't know what it is. It's just a childhood thing. You know what I mean? Like,
I do. I
yeah,
know what you mean, yeah.
yeah. I mean, I think that might be a sailor's tradition because that's why they always name their vessels after a woman. You know, the old saying is if you treat her like a woman, she'll always get you home, right? So it's a she. Yeah. So, and that's true. So, and I've always named all my cars after females, So, and I've never hadn't died in a car wreck once. So I think that was kind of like the same thing with the captain and the doctors. Like, hey, our ship is alive, dude. That's pretty cool. You know,
Yeah.
even when we're not on our A game, the ship is still going to save our ass.
No,
You know.
yeah, no, I know exactly what you mean. Uh, th this really was, this might still be my favorite episode of the entire series.
Yeah. So far it is. So far for me it is, and I know it's only going to get better. It's only going to get better. The only question I got on a sidebar, and then we can probably wrap this one up, I think, is I had this thought on the way up to Atlanta. I was like, the burn happened like 100 years and some change ago. If I were the Borg, wouldn't this be like the best time to infiltrate Federation space?
Well, who's to say the Borg weren't wiped out?
Good point. Good point.
I
Don't
mean,
know.
the burn primarily affected technological beings, so it would make logical sense that the burn would have wiped them out.
Well, I mean, I think I don't know. I mean, we know that Borg cubes and spheres can go at warp, so we assume that they have a warp core with dilithium crystals. We know they can do transwarp too, but they also have a warp core, I would imagine. Now, would the burn have affected their level of dilithium or whatever? And now we're really getting into geek shit. But who knows? I don't know. Maybe something happened to the Borg in between then and now. Hopefully it did. But I was just saying, if there was any time that you wanted to assimilate the Federation and Earth, it would probably be during the burn.
Yeah, you're not wrong. That would be the perfect time.
Yep. Anyway, I like where this is going. I think
Yeah.
this was by far the best episode because now all of the loose ends from the last season are kind of tied up and we can move forward.
Yeah, we can move forward. I think that's a good segue into episode 5.
Sounds like a plan to me.
All right. Okay. So that wraps up our review of episode 4 of Star Trek Discovery season 3. We will be back soon. Probably these videos might be put up at the same time, actually, with our review of episode 5. Stay tuned.